All right, so today we're diving into a book with a title that, let's be honest, sounds maybe a little dry. The Philosophy of Money. You hear that and you're probably thinking, okay, economics class, here we come, something about markets or interest rates. But this masterpiece, written by Georg Simmel right at the turn of the 20th century, is something else entirely. Simmel was a sociologist, a philosopher, a cultural critic, and he had this incredibly bold idea. He said, if you really want to understand modern life, all its anxieties, its freedoms, the very essence of who we are, you don't look at the big, sweeping political sagas. No, you look at the one thing that slips through every single person's hands, the one thing that connects us all, money. For him, it wasn't just a tool, it was a force of nature, kind of like a chemical that could dissolve old worlds and build brand new ones. He was convinced that if we could just wrap our heads around what money does to us, we'd finally get the secret of what we've become.
So let's start right there with a question that's so simple we almost never bother to ask it. What is money, really? I mean, seriously, take a second. That piece of paper in your wallet, it's just a blend of cotton and linen. The coins jingling in your pocket, just little bits of metal. And the number you see in your banking app, that's just a blip of light on a screen, a bit of code on a server somewhere in a data center. On its own, it's basically worthless. And yet, it rules our entire world. It's built on a kind of social trust so deep and so widespread that we literally bet our lives on it every single day. It steers our choices, it carves out the shape of our ambitions, it even structures our days. It's this completely abstract promise that the work you do today can become dinner tomorrow or maybe a home in 10 years. So what is this stuff? Is it a tool, a technology, a shared delusion we all agree to believe in? Or is it something more? What if this thing we think we have under control is actually, in some very profound ways, controlling us?
And that is the exact jumping off point for Georg Simmel. Picture him writing this around the year 1900 in Berlin, a city that was exploding. It was bustling, chaotic, the very picture of industrial modernity. He saw the city as a kind of giant laboratory for creating a new kind of human being. And he argued that the constant, relentless flow of money was forging what he called a new soul for the modern person. This wasn't just about making trade easier. No, it was fundamentally rewiring how we experience reality itself. It was changing our relationship to the stuff we owned, to the people we interact with, and maybe most importantly, our relationship to ourselves. Simmel realized money was the key to understanding the great paradoxes of his time. And listen to these, because they've only gotten more intense in our own. How can we feel more connected to everyone on the planet, but also more alone? How can we feel more free than ever before, but also more trapped? How can we be surrounded by endless choice and still feel somehow completely unfulfilled? So Simmel's first huge concept is this idea of money as the great mediator. Now, when we hear mediator, we think of someone who brings people together. But a mediator is something that stands in the middle. It doesn't just connect two things, it totally changes the relationship between them. And for Simmel, money is the ultimate mediator. It slips itself right in between us and the things we want, between the work we do and the reward we get for it, and between us and other people. And in doing that, it pulls off this incredible magic trick. On one hand, it creates these amazing new connections across huge distances. But at the same time, it creates this new kind of cold, impersonal distance in our most basic everyday interactions. It's this double-edged, contradictory power that makes money the real engine of modern life. To really get this, Simmel asks us to imagine the before. Picture life in, say, a feudal village, a world that runs on personal bonds, not cash. Your whole existence is woven into this thick web of relationships. You owe the local lord a part of your harvest. Not because of some written contract, but because he's the lord and you're his serf. That's just how it is. The blacksmith fixes your plow, and maybe you pay him with a few chickens. The relationship isn't just a transaction. It's personal. It's historical. It's built on who you are and who your family is. And you know what? The powerful landowners back then, they often fought tooth and nail against introducing money. Why? Because money dissolves those personal ties. It gives you an out. A serf who can just pay his lord a tax in coins is suddenly free from that deep personal obligation. He's not tied to the man anymore. He's tied to an abstract system. Now, let's jump to the money economy. Relationships suddenly become functions. When you buy a coffee, you're the buyer. The person behind the counter is the seller. You don't need their life story, they don't need yours. You're both just playing a role, interchangeable cogs in this huge transactional machine. And this creates incredible efficiency and a radical new kind of freedom. It lets you work with people on the other side of the planet, people you'll never meet, to create the phone in your hand. But it also hollows something out, doesn't it? That human element gets smoothed over, replaced by the cool, clean logic of the price. And this distance, it isn't just between people. Simmel said it changes our relationship with the world itself. He wrote that money places us at an even more basic distance from objects. Our contact with them is broken. What on earth does that mean? Well, think about it. Our connection to the physical world is no longer direct. Back in that village, when you trade the chickens you raised for a pair of shoes you desperately need, you feel the value. You feel the loss of the chickens and the gain of the shoes. It's tangible. It's real. But with money, there's this extra step, this buffer. You work a job, maybe you sit at a desk all day, and you get paid an abstract wage. Then you take that abstraction, money, and you trade it for shoes. That buffer, as Simmel says, it weakens the immediacy of impressions. We lose that raw, gut-level connection to the things we use. We see a gorgeous handcrafted table, and our first thought isn't about the skill of the carpenter or the life of the tree. Our first thought is about the price tag. The price becomes a veil, hiding the real world from us.
So how does money get this incredible power? It's because it becomes what Simmel called the universal equivalent. It's a fancy term, but the idea is mind-blowing. Money is the one substance, the one universal language that everything else can be translated into. It's funny, some of Simmel's peers made this wild comparison to the concept of God. In a lot of theology, God is seen as the ultimate principle where all the world's messy, contradictory things find their unity. Simmel says, in the modern world, money plays that exact same role for the economy. It's the meeting point where the most different, the most unrelated things can be compared and made equal. Think about this. The value of a surgeon skill that saves a life, the value of a priceless piece of art, the value of a beautiful rainforest, and the value of a fast food burger. They have absolutely nothing in common qualitatively. But money says, oh yes, they do. It slaps a price on every single one of them. And it's that power, the power to drain every single thing of its unique soul and reduce it to a number, that makes money the ultimate mediator and the great, terrifying leveler of our world.
Now, this process, this constant translating of everything into cash value, it doesn't just happen out there in the world. It happens inside our own heads. And this brings us to Simmel's second big insight, the deep psychological trap of living in a money-driven world. I mean, if money is just supposed to be a tool, right? A means to get other things, what happens to our minds, our goals, our sense of purpose when that tool becomes the single most important thing in our lives? Simmel says this sets up a really dangerous psychological trap. It starts to rewire our brains, leading to this quiet, subtle flip where the servant becomes the master and the means ends up swallowing the end.
Simmel has a name for this, the teleological shift. Teleology is just the philosophy of purpose, of goals and ends. And he says this shift happens in 3 subtle steps. First, it starts out logically. Money is a tool. Its whole purpose is to help us get the things we actually want. Food, a home, security, fun, experiences. It has no value in itself, it's just a bridge to get somewhere else. But then, stage 2, the focus shifts. That bridge is so critical, it's so necessary to get to anything else that we stop thinking about the destination and we start obsessing about the bridge itself. Before we can even ask, what do I really want from life, we have to first ask, well, how do I get the money to do it? All of our energy, our daily grind, it becomes about getting the tool. And then comes the final step, the complete inversion. The tool becomes the treasure. The means becomes the end. The classic example is, the old miser hoarding his gold, getting joy not from what it could buy, but just from having it. But it's not just about misers. Think about the modern workaholic who builds a massive fortune but has no time to ever enjoy it, sacrificing their health, their family, all for a number in a bank account. Or a corporation that's obsessed with quarterly growth for its own sake, totally disconnected from whether its products are actually making life better for anyone. The means, getting money, has become the absolute final goal, totally cut off from any of the real human experiences it was supposed to get us in the first place.
So what does this look like in everyday life? Simmel famously called it the blasé attitude. And this isn't just being bored or lazy, it's a very specific spiritual condition of the modern person, a kind of defense mechanism that has a terrible cost. He called it a deadening of the nerves. On one level, yeah, it's a reaction to the constant sensory overload of city life, but it's also a direct result of the money economy. When our brain gets trained day in and day out to see everything as just another version of the universal equivalent, it starts to lose its ability to see the difference in quality between things. We stop reacting to what Simmel called the specific charms of things. You know, a stunning sunset doesn't have a price tag. A deep, meaningful conversation has no market value. And so the blasé mind, which has been conditioned by money, just doesn't know what to do with them. It learns to ask how much does it cost, way before it ever thinks to ask what is it or how does it make me feel. And that indifference, that inability to be truly wowed by the uniqueness of the world because it's all been flattened into just a number, that's the soul of the blasé attitude. This all builds up to Simmel's third and maybe his biggest and most powerful idea, the tragedy of modern culture. This is the concept that ties it all together. It explains that feeling that is so central to our lives today, that strange paradox of feeling alienated and small and spiritually empty while living in a world that is overflowing with more stuff, more information, more art, more tech, more products than ever before in human history. How is it possible to feel so adrift in a world we created to be so full? Simmel says the answer is in a deep structural problem at the very heart of modern life.
Okay, so here's the engine of the tragedy. On one side, you have what Simmel calls objective culture. This is basically everything humanity has ever made and put out into the world. Think with every book in every library on Earth, every line of computer code ever written, every scientific discovery, every single product on Amazon, every song ever recorded, every single complicated law. The key thing about objective culture is that it just keeps growing and growing, exponentially, without any end in sight. It's this vast, ever-expanding universe of human creation. Now, on the other side, you have subjective culture. That's you, that's me. It's the personal culture of an individual. It's your personal individual ability to soak up, to understand, to master, and to be genuinely enriched by all that stuff in the objective culture. And unlike objective culture, our subjective culture is painfully, tragically finite. We only have so many years to live. We only have so much energy. Our brains can only learn and remember so much. We can only ever get really, really good at a few things, and right there, that's the tragedy. The infinite explosive growth of objective culture is always and increasingly outpacing the very limited, finite capacity of you and me.
And for Simmel, this growing gap is the root cause of that modern feeling of alienation we all know. He argues that all the other, more specific kinds of alienation are really just symptoms of this much deeper problem. For example, the classic idea of a factory worker who's alienated from the product of his labor, the guy who spends all day putting one screw in a car he'll never be able to afford and whose overall design he doesn't even understand, that Simmel says is a perfect miniature of the whole cultural tragedy. That car becomes this alien thing, part of that massive objective culture that looms over the individual, dominating him instead of serving him. And in a way, we are all that factory worker now, facing this massive culture of information, of technology, of systems that we help create, but that has become so huge and so complex that not a single one of us can ever hope to truly grasp it or feel at home inside it.
The psychological result of this ever-widening gap is this chronic, constant feeling of being inadequate and detached. We're haunted by the mountains of books we'll never read, the languages we'll never speak, the news we can't possibly keep up with, the experiences we're told we should be having. Objective culture is like this endless to-do list of demands and opportunities, and it creates this constant pressure on us to consume more, to learn more, to be more productive, just to keep up. It even changes what we think education is for. The old idea of creating a well-rounded, cultivated human being, that gets replaced by the desperate need to just acquire marketable skills and objective facts, just so we don't fall too far behind. And it leaves us feeling like spectators in our own lives, just scrolling through a culture that's supposedly ours, but which we can never, ever truly make our own.
So you hear all this and you think, okay, this was written in 1900. How does it hold up today? Well, it's absolutely stunning how right Simmel was. The forces he saw just beginning over a century ago, they have hit the accelerator in ways he probably couldn't have even dreamed of. The way our relationships are mediated through screens, the psychological trap of chasing likes and metrics, that overwhelming tragedy of a culture that's expanding way beyond our ability to understand it, these aren't just historical ideas. These are the defining features of our lives in the 21st century. Simmel's philosophy isn't some dusty old book. It's an essential survival guide for the world we are living in right this second. Because this is the end result, isn't it?
A world that's been flattened by a single standard of value. A world where every unique, beautiful quality gets relentlessly ground down into a simple quantity. Simmel saw the start of this, but we are living in its peak. In our digital lives, the value of an idea, a piece of art, isn't judged by its truth or its beauty, but by its likes, its shares, its views. Pure numbers. The worth of a person can feel like it's being judged by their salary or their follower count. The value of our own time is broken down into an hourly wage. This process of turning everything into a number has crept into every single corner of our lives. And yeah, it's incredibly efficient for running a complicated world, but the cost is huge. We systematically devalue everything that is unique, personal, spiritual, and qualitative. Everything that refuses to be counted.
And so, that leaves us with one last, really challenging thought. Simmel's shown us how money, this thing that's just a social agreement, has taken on this almost godlike power. It's become the expression and equivalent of all values. It has the power to change our reality, to rewire our brains, and to create a culture that gives us so much, but also overwhelms us. So if we accept his diagnosis, if we accept that money has become the ultimate measure of all things in our world, then we have to face this final, haunting question. What is left when something has no price? In a world that is so completely dominated by a single numerical standard, what happens to the things that just refuse to play along? What is the value of integrity, of real friendship, of a moment of true, unmediated connection? What is the value of love, of honor, of beauty, of compassion? Are these things just worthless relics from an old-fashioned world because you can't buy or sell them? Or do they represent a different, deeper kind of value altogether? A kind of value that our money-obsessed culture makes it harder and harder for us to even see, let alone hold on to. Simmel doesn't give us an easy answer. He just leaves us with the challenge to try and recognize the priceless in a world that is screaming at us that everything and everyone has a price.